welcome this evening. Welcome to the magnificent Midland Hotel in Manchester for this, the Place Northwest Greater Manchester Mayoral debate, featuring 3 candidates, each competing to become the first directly elected Mayor of Greater Manchester. Conservative candidate Sean Anstey, Liberal Democrat candidate Jane Brophy, and Labour Party candidate Andy Burnham. I'm Paul Unger, editor of Place Northwest, and over the course of the next hour or so, I'll be guiding the discussion as the candidates try to persuade you that they deserve to be elected mayor on the 4th of May, where the winner will get a mandate to govern 2.7 million people. I'd like to thank you in the audience for coming along on this chilly Friday evening. I think the turnout is testament to the excitement around this topic and this new form of government that we're getting as part of the devolution deal with government for what I hope proves to be a very interesting debate. Thanks, of course, go to our candidates for giving their time and cooperation in helping us organise this special debate, and we're all looking forward to what you have to say. A special thanks to all our event partners this evening, to Lovell Partnerships, Iceni Projects and PPS Group. Tonight here, the 3 candidates are going to be debating questions on a whole range of topics. Candidates have not been shown questions beforehand, which is very important. Questions have been gathered from people amongst you in the audience through dozens of emails that I've received in the last couple of weeks before tonight. The format of the debate will be in 3 parts. The first part will start with candidates each getting 5 minutes to make their opening remarks. I'll give a verbal cue at 30 seconds to go, that you've got 30 seconds to go, and start winding up. Hopefully it's going to be as simple as that to follow. The second part will be questions from me on 5 topics drawn from the best of the questions that have been selected, submitted in advance. Candidates will each be given 2 minutes to answer the question before we move on to the next question. 5 questions in all, taken one question at a time. The third part, we'll open it out into the audience for questions from the floor. This is your chance to put questions and for the candidates to debate with each other. Please make your questions short and simple for all to understand. Wait for the microphone to reach you. We will have 3 people roaming around the room with microphones. Introduce yourself with your name and your organisation, if you would, please. And please, no long political statements from the floor. We're here to put questions to the candidates. If you'd like to follow the debate online, you can, of course, do so using Twitter, using the GM Mayor hashtag. That's hashtag GM Mayor. And we're also streaming live on Facebook Live via the Place Northwest page, and the link will be shared on other social media channels. So, without further ado, the candidates' opening remarks, 5 minutes each. We're taking this purely in alphabetical order. Sean Anstey.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. And let me just start by saying Greater Manchester is on the verge of something special. We're a confident and ambitious place with strengths like nowhere else to be seen in the UK. I was born here, I went to school here, I grew up here, and I live here. Greater Manchester is more than just a place on the map. It's my home, and it's a place that I care very passionately about. I grew up in Partington. I went to my local high school. I started an apprenticeship. I completed my degree at Manchester Metropolitan University part-time. I understand, I think, what makes Greater Manchester tick. How where you're from doesn't need to define where you're going to end up. As we approach May the 4th, we should do so with an excitement and a belief in the art of the possible, that collectively we can change the way that this city region works for the 2.8 million people that are proud to call Greater Manchester home. And I'm not in this race just to make up the numbers. I'm here to try and win it, because Greater Manchester deserves a mayor who has an ambition for our city that can have such a profoundly positive impact on what it means to be born, to grow up, and to live and work here. We're a global city with global potential. We need an outward-looking Greater Manchester, confident on the international stage, attracting inward investment, creating high-value jobs, using Manchester Airport and our universities to help trade with the world and to see investment in our infrastructure. We need a city region that's easier to get around. It means a wealthier Greater Manchester, where the profitability and productivity of our businesses is a priority, and that ensuring the many people that get up every morning and do the right thing and support their families are able to get on. It means having a skills and employment system that sees people not just get a job, but get a good job with decent pay and the opportunity to get promoted. And thirdly, it means making sure that everybody in Greater Manchester is able to realise their potential and feel part of our shared success. A health and social care system that concentrates on well-being and employment. Everybody being able to realise their right to have a place they're proud to call home in safe and sustainable communities. As we leave the European Union, it falls to us to define our path in the world, to take responsibility for those decisions that need to be made. Over the last 4 years, I've been pivotal in arguing the case that decisions about Greater Manchester shouldn't just be made in Westminster, but that we're bold enough, brave enough, and capable enough to determine our own future. At the end of this election, we'll have a mayor who will be responsible for leading Greater Manchester, for using our new powers to be all that we can be. And I think it would be an absolute travesty if we allow our politics to be defined by the paralysis of decision-making that is so prevalent in Westminster. There'll be some really tough choices along the way. I think we're at a defining moment about choosing who we think is best placed to take those decisions and realise an ambition to be a global, wealthier city region where everybody is able to realise their potential. And for me, politics is about helping people to realise their hopes and dreams. It's about being resilient enough to advance the interests of the many over the few. I will be that mayor, and together we can create a new, bold Greater Manchester. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Jane Brophy.
Thank you. Let me start too by saying I grew up in Manchester. I went to school in Brooklands and then Chorlton. So I've worked in public services for most of my professional life, and this has included various public health roles across Greater Manchester and within the NHS. I've also represented my local area in Trafford for 16 years as an elected councillor and as a community activist. So through my personal experience of the NHS and as a councillor, I'm increasingly aware of the shortfalls and funding gaps within our service. And I can assure you that there are lots of things going on, so we're facing real problems in the NHS and social care, and we need real solutions, not just the same old political platitudes of the last 30 years. So we're deeply divided, not just as a country, but as a region. The referendum result of last year made that all too clear. I believe our place in the world and our continuing prosperity is best secured by being in Europe, at its heart and not pushed to the sidelines. However, I respect the results and believe we must fight to retain our place within the single market. And whatever deal is reached over the next few years, we should all have a say on that deal. We do have a north-south economic divide in Greater Manchester that needs to be addressed. However, this can only be dealt with by securing a strong, local, highly trained workforce ready to welcome the world of business and commerce to Greater Manchester. Top-down skills have failed to deliver this. The training hasn't worked, and as your mayor, I will make sure it's a priority to train and prepare everyone so that we all have the opportunity to step forward into a brighter future of work, prosperity and higher paid jobs. I want Greater Manchester to be a world-class, outward-looking international city that welcomes the world and all the benefits that it can bring. So we need a fully integrated transport system within Greater Manchester that gets people to where they need to be at an affordable price without the constraints of needing to buy different tickets. A better transport system will allow us to tackle air pollution across Greater Manchester. This in turn will have a knock-on effect for everyone's health, leading to a better quality of life for all. This is why I'm currently against greenbelt developments when we have so many more spaces within our cities and town centres that should be developed first. We need to safeguard our green spaces across Greater Manchester for the future well-being of generations to come. So I'm going to talk a bit more about housing in the next bit. So we're building a sprawling city of the 19th century when we're living in the 21st century. And that's why I also think we need fresh thinking to tackle climate change and air pollution to ensure we have a safe world for our children. I want to be an open, transparent mayor that welcomes everyone, breaking down the barriers between voters and politicians. I want us to be a shining, tolerant beacon to the rest of the country and the world. I want us to be united in tackling the problems that this city faces after years of failure and false promises from our politicians. So let's all step forward together for Greater Manchester.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Andy Burnham.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see so many of you here. The first mayoral hustings debate. The interest in the contest is really fantastic, I think, for all of the candidates to see. But obviously we meet in probably the most unprecedented and uncertain times in our political lives, in all of our lives. The world is changing out there, and we don't know what the future holds. But also here in Greater Manchester, we have an unprecedented opportunity before us that's also a challenge, because the spotlight is on Greater Manchester, and people are looking at us to see how we rise to the challenge of devolution. So what I would say to you all, given all of that, what Greater Manchester needs now more than ever is strong, experienced political leadership. And that is what I can provide. I have been a Member of Parliament in Greater Manchester for 16 years, representing the proud town of Leigh, the great town of Leigh. And I hope if you ask people there, they will tell you what kind of person I am. I'm somebody with my feet on the ground and has worked hard to put Leigh on the map, to improve and regenerate my community. But also, I have had roles in government, a number of cabinet roles in the last government. And when I was in those positions, I used them for the benefit of Greater Manchester and the north of England, because that is what brought me into politics in the first place in the 1980s, the sense that we were treated as second class, that we didn't get a fair deal. So as Culture Secretary, I was instrumental in bringing the BBC to Media City. As Health Secretary, I helped rebuild the NHS estate across Greater Manchester at Salford Royal, at Manchester Royal Infirmary too. And as Shadow Health Secretary, began a debate, led the national debate around the integration of health and social care. That remains a major challenge, and the health service, as part of the devolution deal, is something that needs to be at the forefront of everybody's minds. As a former Health Secretary, I am well placed to ensure that Greater Manchester rises to that challenge, and we here have a health service that is better than the rest. I don't just want to go through my CV, because in the end, it's not your experience that matters, it's your values too. And you may remember in 2009, when I was Culture Secretary, I went to Anfield on the 20th anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster. And if I'm honest, that was something that my own government, the government I was in, had not done enough about. And we heard what happened that day. Now, if I was the kind of person that only thought about my career, I would have walked away. But I'm not like that. I am somebody who cares passionately about the voices of people from the northwest of England. And I took their fight back to Whitehall, and I stood up for those families. And I took on the establishment. And that's what Greater Manchester needs. Somebody who will fight for a fair deal for people here, who will stand up to the powers that be and be a true voice for them, a strong voice. And that is what I did at a time when the government, beneath the label of Northern Powerhouse, is cutting northern councils, cutting northern schools. You need somebody who will fight for a fair deal. But I'm also somebody who is above partisan politics. I worked with the former Home Secretary, now Prime Minister, to help deliver the progress that we saw on Hillsborough. And I would continue to do that as your mayor, working across party political lines to make sure that we get the best for Greater Manchester and the people here. And that is what I would continue to do. But more than anything, I've got a passion for Greater Manchester, for the northwest of England. And I believe there is such a great opportunity before us now. We have so much to offer, and we do need to ensure that Greater Manchester remains a European city, open to the world. And we put forward a vision for what we can be in the future. I will put young people at the heart of my mayoral manifesto. I will make a big change. Devolution allows us to change the way we do things. Westminster has made young people the target for cuts. Well, I will make them my priority for investment. We will never succeed unless we invest in our people and give them the skills that they will need to make a success of themselves. I want to solve the housing crisis and bring social care into the NHS to change the way we care for people. Now is the time for Greater Manchester to get its voice heard more loudly than ever before. And that is what I will do if I'm elected as your first mayor.
Okay, and on to the set questions where the candidates have 2 minutes each to answer. The first question is a question on skills. These are all submitted by those amongst you in the audience today. This question is from Tareen Shad, Business Development Manager at Lovell Partnerships. One of the key issues affecting housing and the delivery of new homes is having enough labour to build them. Do the panel feel that the current provision of skills and skills funding is adequate, and what plans do you have to help colleges and schools provide the right skills required for industry? In the same order, Sean Anstey.
Well, I've had responsibility for skills and employment in Greater Manchester for the last 3 years. I know what powers we're going to be having over skills and employment, whether it's the devolution of the adult education budget, the apprenticeship grant for employers, there's a new apprenticeship levy that comes in next year. And ultimately what we need to do is have a skills system that is responsive to what the labour market is telling us. I mean, we know that employers out there are desperately trying to get young people into jobs, but they're saying that young people are not work ready to do that. Across Greater Manchester today, 45% of our young people leave secondary school not ready to start work. 40% of our young people are not ready to start primary school. And there's massive disparities in Greater Manchester where if you're in some parts of the conurbation, that figure is as high as 70%. We have to fix that if we want to be able to progress in future. But we can't have a conversation about adult skills unless you have a conversation about early years. This is about trying to get generational change for our young people across Greater Manchester. It's about trying to say that if you want to get on in work and get promoted and get a new job, we're going to have a skills system that is responsive. I think I'd use those powers to do what I've been doing already for the last 3 years, which is to make sure that we have the workforce of the future that is doing what we need to be able to create a more prosperous Greater Manchester.
Okay, thank you. Jane Brophy.
Well, I think the skills are key to the future, aren't they? So we need to look at skills at all level. We need to look at the early years skills. We need to improve educational outcomes for our children. And we need to look at the universities and the investment in our universities. I'm quite concerned about Brexit and how that's going to impact on research and the status of our universities. So that's a key thing where the skills begin. But I guess for the building industry here, which many of you will be part of, you want to know that the skills are there to match the jobs that there are that you need to do the building that you're investing in. So I think key to skills as well is it's part of the investment in the north and into Greater Manchester. We need world-class research being developed. So it's about just making sure we've looked at skills at every single level. So it's not just about people who have been through the education system, it's later in life. It's thinking of people who are over 50, who maybe haven't got the skills for the jobs of the new economy. We need to make sure that they're given the opportunities to go back into training and to make sure they can come back into the workforce, because after all, it all links together, and that's one of the key things about the role of Greater Manchester Mayor, is all these different strands linked together, and skills links together with our health and social care agenda as well. So if you've got people with long-term disabilities and who need to get back into work, if you can equip them with the right resources and the right healthcare, then you get people back into work and to play their part in the economy, as most people do. So I would look at skills and education all in as one big strand of how we're going to work, and I will champion them. I actually do agree with Sean about early years. I would say that a lot of the issues around people's health, it begins in the early years. So I will be a strong supporter of the Sure Start centres as well, where they're providing provision for people in very early in life.
Okay, thank you. Andy Burnham.
Well, I think the question is a really clever one, because it really anticipates the opportunity that will be before the new mayor, and that is not to think about infrastructure in isolation from the kind of human capital, because the vision here is to say we need new houses in Greater Manchester of all types, but let's train our young people here to build those homes of the future. And that hasn't happened in the way policy has worked in the past, and that is our opportunity. But in terms of is there enough funding in the system, well, I would have doubts about that. My brother is the principal of a sixth form college in the Northwest, and he would say not. FE has been cut quite heavily at post-16 education. Also, as I indicated at the beginning, Greater Manchester schools are facing cuts under this new funding formula that the government has brought through. Practically all schools in Greater Manchester. I don't think that's right. And you need somebody who's going to challenge that, because we don't build a 21st century skills system by cutting secondary schools in Greater Manchester. Yes, Sean, absolutely invest in those early years of life, 0 to 4. But the big point I would make is we need a new ambition around technical education. For too long, the Westminster approach has been to obsess on the university route. And that fails at least 50% of young people in Greater Manchester. We don't instill hope in their hearts while they're at school that there is something waiting for them at the end of school. They can't see where school is taking them. It doesn't seem as though it's going to take them to a worthwhile career. That's why I've proposed the idea of a UCAS-style system for apprenticeships across Greater Manchester. I want young people here, wherever they live, to see everything that's available so that they have a clear sense of where they're going in life. In the same way that somebody on the university route has clarity, I want the same for young people who want a technical education. And I will be asking every single person in this room to get behind that drive, to create more apprenticeships, to make sure that we give a decent opportunity to every young person in Greater Manchester, because that, in the end, is the way we build a stronger and more prosperous society.
Okay, thank you. Next question is one about local transport. A question from Ewan Gorry, who's an audit trainee at BDO. What are your views on the current Metrolink transport service, including the efficiency and cost to consumers, and what plans do you have for it in the future? Sean Anstey.
Well, I think the Metrolink system is a huge asset to Greater Manchester, and it's one of those things where we can show that if we've collaborated with each other, that we can do something in a better way that happens in London and Westminster. The Metrolink is a huge part of our public transport system, but actually everybody deserves a road network, a bus network, a train network, a tram network that is working streamlined and integrated with each other, because we need to have a city region that is easier to get around. I've been part of the team for the last few years that has made sure that we're delivering on Metrolink extensions out to Rochdale, to Ashton, to just about to start to Trafford Park. I think we need to continue to make sure that we have a local transport network that's integrated, that is working to be able to make our journeys across Greater Manchester a lot easier than what it is for people today, because ultimately that's what this is about. And I think we're going to have the opportunity to have more integrated, streamlined ticketing, to have a fare structure that is much easier for people to understand and use. And as Mayor, I'd make sure that we very quickly move to a place where we, I think, move us from a stop-to-stop system that we have on the Metrolink system to a more zonal system that we see in London, where we can have that ability to be able to have multiple trips, smart ticketing, the way to be able to use an Oyster card-style system across the city, because ultimately this is about helping people using our transport network to enable economic growth and access to jobs in Greater Manchester.
Thank you very much. Jane Brophy.
Okay, well, it's a really good question on the Metrolink, because actually the Metrolink in Greater Manchester was funded by the European Union. So I think absolutely we need to look at expanding Metrolink to all 10 boroughs. We need to introduce more double-length trams to ease overcrowding at busy times. So also, let's think big and imaginatively what we could do with Metrolink. Why not have like a circular route all the way around Greater Manchester? So we need to introduce the smart ticketing system, so you can pay all at once to go on the tram, the train and the bus. Why not have something like a 1-hour ticket, so that allows you unlimited travel on bus, tram and train in Greater Manchester, all within a time zone. So also we need to look at improving the reliability of public transport, because that leaves congestion on the roads. So we need to have, in Greater Manchester, transport is really key to this. We need to have nowhere that's cut off. So everywhere in Greater Manchester needs to have good, reliable, affordable public transport that links to our main employment centres, and especially into Manchester city centre.
Okay, thank you. Andy Burnham.
Well, I think Metrolink is as good as far as it goes, but it's not good enough, nor is Greater Manchester's public transport system as a whole. What is the reason for that? It goes back a long way, and it's about the north-south divide. For every £1 that the north of England receives in transport investment, London gets 6. And that gives us the public transport system that we've got today that simply doesn't serve the public well enough. If London had our public transport system, there'd be riots on the streets. People would not put up with it. You know, it's a world away from what they have got. And we need to improve all modes of transport, Metrolink included, because no one mode will solve things. We've got to start with the buses. The deregulation of buses in Greater Manchester was and has been a disaster. It's been a free-for-all. Bus usage in Greater Manchester has gone down all through the last 30 years, and it's at a lowest ever level right now because the cost has gone up and they've become poorer quality, confusing. The Greater Manchester Labour leaders insisted as part of the devolution deal that we get the power to re-regulate our buses. And I want to tell you tonight that I will use that power to the full to improve the quality of our services, their reliability, and also to have fairer pricing. We do need to look at extending Metrolink, absolutely. We also need to think about a dedicated, high-quality cycle network across all of Greater Manchester. Because I'll finish on this point. What I see as I go around is that congestion is becoming a bigger and bigger problem for Greater Manchester. And in fact, could become a real barrier to inward investment. Because if people are coming here to look at the possibility of investing here, they are not going to be impressed by the state of our roads. We need to think through transport in a different way, where we improve Metrolink, we improve the bus services, we give people alternatives to the car, because I am pretty certain we can't carry on as we are.
Okay. I don't know how everybody seems to know exactly how long 2 minutes is without any stopwatches in front of you, but
Professionals, Paul.
That's a bunch of professionals, absolutely. The next question is the first one on the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, and I'll reverse the order as well, just to be fair in terms of the time to answer the question. A question from Steve Renshaw, Planning Director of Lateral Property Group. The Greater Manchester Spatial Framework requires a unanimous vote of the Mayor's Cabinet to be adopted. Given recent comments on the draft framework by members of the panel, is this likely to ever be achieved for a plan that delivers significant growth from Greater Manchester? Andy Burnham.
Well, firstly, I would say that we need a plan. We need a spatial framework for Greater Manchester, because otherwise you get a free-for-all, and I don't think that helps anybody. Secondly, I would endorse the ambitions in the plan, particularly around home building. So I don't back away from the numbers of homes that Greater Manchester wants to build and proposed in the spatial framework. There is a but, however, because I feel if you built according to the spatial framework, I don't believe you build a mix of housing to solve Greater Manchester's housing crisis. I think it would have led to an oversupply of larger homes and not enough homes that are affordable to rent or to buy for people to solve the housing crisis. And that is what we should be aiming to do here. We should have a 20-year vision to make sure everybody has got an affordable home to rent or to own. My second problem with it was that it too much put more cars onto the roads and wasn't integrated with our public transport system. You know, again, if we'd built it as the plan said, the gridlock I was just talking about would get so much worse. We can be more imaginative than that. I would like to see a big shift towards our town centres. Let's revitalise them. You know, they are not the retail centres they once were. So let's rethink them as residential centres with high-quality living space, higher density housing, but better integrated with the public transport system. The third issue I had with it, I don't think it was ambitious enough when it came to industry. It was over-reliant on warehousing and distribution. And again, I think we can aim higher than that. I think we need a vision for industry here that is about 21st century industry, digital, that's about health and care, advanced manufacturing, renewable energy. I would like to have seen those kind of ambitions in the spatial framework. So yes, I would rewrite it if I was mayor. I would want to see a reduction in the green space taken. But I am not somebody who opposes development. I just want the right kind of development that makes Greater Manchester a great place to live. And I didn't believe the first draft did that.
Okay, thank you. Jane Brophy.
Yeah, if you've looked at our press release, we also oppose the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. It was my colleagues in Stockport that decided that it wasn't a good idea, because we think it should be rewritten, because at the moment it's a top-down approach. It should be much more bottom-up. And we're not convinced that actually developing all that green belt is the way forward, because there's other things that need to be done first. So we need to be discerning about what we call green belt, of course, but we need to unlock all the brownfield sites first, because what we need to think about is there's plenty of those brownfield sites that are actually just need a little bit more government incentive, and then those are the places to build. And the reason for this is because we want to look at the big picture and take things as a whole. Because actually, Greater Manchester as a city, it's quite spaced out. And if you build in all those greenfield areas, you've not got the infrastructure, you've not got the transport, which is going to actually, at the end of the day, encourage people to use their cars. And what we want is a green Greater Manchester, reducing the pollution. So if we go to look at building things, say the high-rise places, I've got some more to say about that before, because what we want to look at is we want a 21st century building, so we need to make sure we build upwards in those spaces where you've got the infrastructure already, and we need to make the city a nice, pleasant place for everybody to live. So I think we need to really think carefully about how we manage the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. My party has called for it to be scrapped and rethinked because it isn't delivering for the people of Greater Manchester. I think we should listen to those voices of local people out there about why they don't want the green belt being developed on, because actually it doesn't have the infrastructure and it doesn't actually deliver the affordable housing that we need as a city. A lot of those homes that will be built, if we go ahead with that plan to develop the green belt as it is, they won't be particularly affordable for the average person. The sorts of homes we're building, maybe £300,000, that's out of the reach of the average waged person in Greater Manchester. So when we tackle the housing crisis, which of course we need to do that, we need to make sure that the houses we build are affordable for people who are ordinary working people.
Thank you. Sean Anstey.
Well, I think, the basis on which some of the assertions that have just been made are without foundation. The Greater Manchester Spatial Framework is critical to the future prosperity of Greater Manchester, about making sure that we have the jobs that everybody so talks about that we want to see, that we have transport infrastructure that is as we have an ambition to be able to deliver. And, the GMSF is not going to go away after the 4th of May. This is a plan that's going to be with us for the next 20 years. It needs to be flexible enough to respond to a changing economy, to be able to make sure that we can get the homes and jobs that we need across Greater Manchester. And one of the ways that we don't do that is to look at what essentially is 2.5 years worth of work, to do something that is so bold and ambitious, which is to spatially plan on a level they've never seen before in the UK, across boundaries, because we know that if we do that, we can have the right development, we can have transport infrastructure with it at the same time. But it's going to need tough decisions. It's going to need to be able to say that at some point, a politician and the combined authority and the mayor is going to have to take a decision on the spatial framework, because for every day that we delay making a decision on it, or we rewrite it, or we avoid some of the things that we would want to see, we're letting down the people of this city region. We're letting them down because we're not giving them the homes that they need. We're not building the transport network that everybody so wants to see. We're not making Greater Manchester an open and attractive place to come and invest. And that's what we should be talking about, because that's what the spatial framework is designed to do. And who is best to deliver that, I think, is somebody who has a very strong relationship already with the leaders across the combined authority. I've spent 4 years of my life working with other Labour leaders across Greater Manchester. I know that we can find a solution to this, but we can only do it if we're going to be bold and brave enough in our decision making.
Okay, penultimate question of this part of the debate. On economy and particularly the north-south divide, question from Kevin Gopal, editor, Big Issue in the North. What can the mayor achieve in rebalancing the economy when industrial, monetary and fiscal powers will largely remain with central government? Andy Burnham.
Well, we do have to rebalance the economy. We have to rebalance the country from south to north, because we do have a major productivity gap between the northwest of England and particularly London. And critical, if we're to do that, is to invest in skills, as I mentioned earlier, but also in transport infrastructure. I will make the argument that the government must commit to west to east rail investment across the north of England, linking the great cities. It's got to be a higher priority for investment than Crossrail 2, because in my view, if they spend more money on London, we will wait forever for that rail investment and we will never get a northern powerhouse, because there cannot be a northern powerhouse without much better transport connectivity. Personally, I would build it all as one system, HS2 and HS3 Northern Powerhouse Rail together, give a real confidence boost to the north of England. But beyond that, we've got to now decide, where is our prosperity coming from? Where are those key sectors? And the ones that I mentioned before: advanced manufacturing, health and care, digital, renewable energy. I want to re-industrialise Greater Manchester. I want us to be the modern industrial capital of the country. I want to build clusters between our big businesses, small businesses, universities, colleges, so that we can focus on those industries and invest in them. And here's possibly the opportunity that Brexit provides. If we get more flexibility over European state aid rules, I would make no bones about prioritising Greater Manchester companies for that investment, to build up those industries, but to say to them in return, we want them to bring forward the apprenticeships, we want them to provide decent working conditions, the living wage, an end to 0 hours contracts. I would like to see a new relationship with business across Greater Manchester, where we work together to build this city region, to make it the industrial capital of this country that it once was, and at the same time show that you can do that while also looking after people and giving them employment security. In the end, I would like Greater Manchester to be looked at by the rest of the country as a beacon of social justice to the rest, a place where we do want to get on in life and we do want to build our industries, but a place where we leave nobody behind, no community behind, and we give everybody the opportunity to take part in that growth. You know, if we look at Greater Manchester in the last 20 years, huge success in parts of the city region, the city centre, the airport, Media City, East Manchester. But too many places of Greater Manchester felt completely left out. They're the places that voted leave at the referendum. What we've got to do in the next 20 years is apply the success we've had here to the whole of Greater Manchester.
Thank you. Jane Brophy.
Well, we've got two north-south divides, haven't we? We've got a north-south divide across the United Kingdom. We want to have investment in the north. Now, I've been thinking about this, and actually one proposal I've heard recently is we could actually just move the power more to the north of England. While Westminster's being redeveloped, why not just move the Westminster to Manchester? It would be ideal. We've got Media City here, and that's one idea that we need to think about. But we've also got a north-south divide in the place where we live as well, because we've got massive health inequalities in Greater Manchester. We've got the northern parts and the southern parts of our city, and we need to bring those all together. So not only do we need to think about investment kind of redistributing between the United Kingdom, we also need to think about in our own city as well. I think it is about bringing investment. I'm actually extremely concerned about the way Theresa May is taking us towards a hard Brexit. I don't agree with Andy Burnham on this. I do think that Brexit is a step back. Greater Manchester needs us to be in the single market. We need to keep those strongest possible links with the European Union, and I certainly will be continuing to keep those stronger links as the Greater Manchester Mayor. And I think post-Brexit, we've got to make sure we have a say on the deal that we're going to have. And that's something that I will be campaigning as well, to make sure we have those strong links. But it's also about making sure we actually get the proper investment into Greater Manchester. I'm mentioning transport as well. HS2, what we're seeing at the moment is we've got the first part of the development is going to be Birmingham to London. Why didn't we have the two things going on at the same time? Why don't we make sure that development of HS2 happens even more quickly, so that the Birmingham to Manchester is actually happening at the same time, speeding up our place in the United Kingdom and our place in the world?
Thank you. Sean Anstey.
You know, beyond the north-south divide, we should be looking to lift our sights to be much higher and much more ambitious around the world, to look at those cities that we want to be able to compete with, to attract investment, because we're not going to make the UK more prosperous just by shifting wealth from one part of it to another. We're going to make the UK more prosperous by making Greater Manchester even better than what it is today. One of the ways that you do that is by having a very clear view about where our new employment spaces are going to be, where our new jobs are going to come from, the types of industries that we want in Greater Manchester, where our people are going to live. And so there's an intrinsic link between the statements that we've just heard around the spatial framework and then the answers that are being given now. Because you can't have one without the other. They both complement each other. They both say that we can be a global, ambitious, confident city that is attracting investment, attracting new jobs. Because that's one of the ways in which we overcome a north-south divide, is by saying that we're not inhibited by some of the things that actually hold London back. We have our own assets, our own strengths, and we need to be much more positive about using them to say that we're going to create an economy here in Greater Manchester that is much more sustainable, that is putting people into the jobs that we need people to have, that our transport investment is of a scale that is going to be greater than we've ever seen before. If we do all of that, we'll no longer be talking about a north-south divide. We'll have people looking into Greater Manchester saying, how did we do that? And how can we do it too? And that's the ambition that we should have for our region.
Okay. And the last question of this second part is a question about the role, and I think it's getting to the issue of career politics, career politicians, without making any accusations. A question from Steve Gillingham, Mace UK North Director. How are you going to convince us that you want this role to create benefits for Greater Manchester rather than it simply being a high-profile career move? Jane Brophy.
Okay, well, I'm not a career politician. I'm a local councillor, but my main area of work is in the NHS, and I'm in this because I want Greater Manchester to be a fantastic place. And I think not being a career politician means that the sort of person that will represent everybody in Greater Manchester will be somebody who actually has real experience of family life, with challenges, with working in the NHS, with being amongst local communities in Greater Manchester. So I would say what Greater Manchester needs is somebody who understands the issues of families, somebody who's worked in the local community, somebody who is approachable, somebody who's in it to make Greater Manchester the fantastic, great place it already is, but actually to be a champion, a beacon for things. I think some of the things that I would take forward might be different to my colleagues. I'd be a champion for things like mental health and our young people. I'd be a champion for health and social care because I've worked in the NHS and I can see what the impact is directly. I'd be a champion for somebody who was carers as well, because actually it's not just about the businesses and about, of course we want the investment to come to Greater Manchester, but what we need is somebody who will represent all people, not just business people, not just the high flyers, but to represent everybody in Greater Manchester.
Okay, thank you. Sean Anstey?
Well, I think one of the things that I often get asked as somebody who is as fresh-faced and young as I am is are you, why are you doing this, Sean? What is it that, why do you want to do it? Is it just your next stepping stone to somewhere else? And I think what I'd say to that is, like, I have a passion for Greater Manchester and for this role. It's one of the reasons, as I said before, why for the last 4 years, I've been working to make sure that we, here in Greater Manchester, get to control what happens with the future decisions of our city and our city region. It's really important that we choose somebody for this role who says that we can be better than what we are today, that we can use the mayoralty to meet our aspirations and ambitions. And I want to do this because I think that we need to not miss the opportunity of the mayoralty. This mayoralty is about getting things done. Making a difference for the people that live and work in Greater Manchester, not using it to shout from the sidelines. We know that we're building on a strong foundation here in Greater Manchester, that we need somebody who is going to be able to say that we can bring everybody with us, that we can take the tough decisions that are right for the long-term future of our city region. I know that's something that I can do, and it's a reason I'm so passionate about trying to get this role in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Burnham.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Sean's just said, and a lot of those reasons are mine as well. And I understand what's implicit in the question, though. I understand what the frustration, the alienation people feel from politics. I suppose what I would say to the questioner is, if I was a career politician, I would just stay in Westminster and stay where people perceive career politicians to live. The truth of the matter is, I came into politics to change things for Greater Manchester, for the northwest of England, and I've become disillusioned with the way our political system works. It's an overly centralised system. You know, I've done my best to argue against the London-centric nature of our country, and there's only so much you can achieve as one of 650 voices in the House of Commons when it has an inbuilt bias towards the area inside the M25. And I've concluded that we're more likely to make a real change to the way this country is run by investing and building up devolution here. But I would want to reassure you that I don't see this as the same old through the new structures. I think we've got to change politics completely. I'm doing this to make a real change, to involve people indifferently in the way we make political decisions, to rethink politics from the bottom up. I think that's what's got to happen, because we're living through a political crisis right now. People's alienation from politics is huge, and we need to show that through this we can involve people differently. And I want to lead from the front. It may be a small thing, it may be a gesture, who knows, but I've said that if I'm elected, I will give 15% of my mayoral salary to a new fund to tackle homelessness across Greater Manchester. Why? Because I want to put my money where my mouth is. I'm doing this to make real changes. And I'd be wanting to go to all of you in this room and say, do you know what, I'm doing something, can you not do something too? Because we're not going to succeed as Greater Manchester if it's going with the begging bowl to London all the time. We want to do something, can we have some money? We've got to start doing more for ourselves, showing that we can tackle things that bother people here in Greater Manchester. We're not the kind of people who just walk past people huddled in the doorways. We do care about people, and we don't want to see it. And that's why I'm doing this. I feel I can make some more real and lasting change by doing this. It's not a stepping stone for me. I want to devote what remains of my political career to building up the voice of Greater Manchester, showing that devolution in England can work, and rebalancing this country from south to north. It's why I joined the Labour Party age 15. That's what I wanted to do. It's still what I want to do. And I feel this is a moment that if we show that we mean it, we can really change the way this country works.
Okay, so the shackles of the stopwatch will be taken off now for the next half hour, and we'll open it out to the floor. We've got some lined up already, but there will be a chance for everyone to join in. We've got a question from Rebecca Fieldhouse.
Thank you. Rebecca Fieldhouse, planning consultant at Iceni Projects. How are you going to unite Manchester's local leaders and chief executives who've not worked under a mayor before?
Who wants to take that first?
Well, I think I'll start by saying that I already have the experience of doing this. I'm the only Conservative in a group of 10 are the Greater Manchester Combined Authority at the moment. And, you know, I get up to say that we know that my own self-interest or own political interest is not what's driving us here. What's driving us here is creating a Greater Manchester that is much better for people to live and work in. And I think what you find in politics is people want people who are genuine, authentic, who are prepared to listen, to be able to work through perhaps those normal barriers that we see in the first place. I don't think there's anybody on this stage who's done that more for Greater Manchester than me over the last 4 years.
Okay. Anybody else want to come in on uniting the 10 councils?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll come in if you like.
Okay, Jane.
I think it's actually more. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Come on. I think it's actually more than just uniting the 10 councils, isn't it? Because I think one of the real opportunities of the role of mayor is just the breadth of people that you've got to unite and work together with. There's the whole health and social care agenda as well, because a lot of people in that sector don't actually naturally work together. You tend to have the social care in the silos and the health in the silos, and the mental health is in another area as well. So all those people need to come together. You've got the policing role, you've got the planning role, so you've got, as you said, the actual Greater Manchester leaders coming together. So it's more than just getting those people working together. I think it's about getting all of those strands of political influence working together. And that's where I think the mayor will play a key role, and the opportunities of this role are to bring that thinking together and get out of the silo way of thinking that I think has plagued health and social care and plagued our systems. We want to make sure that everything works together, and I think if you can get the leaders working together and speaking from one voice and leading for Greater Manchester, then that means that'll work all the way down, and we need to kind of look across at the benefits of the policing service, look across at the benefits of the health and social care, look across at the leaders of local councils working together. If we're going to get health and social care sorted in Greater Manchester, we really need to have that leadership working right from the top, and for it to be a real understanding and to understand what local people want as well, and actually make sure the consultations and the communications are genuine rather than just, this body at the top deciding for people. We need to make sure it's a grassroots movement in Greater Manchester and that we all work together. And I think it's a good question, because I think if you've got those leaders working together, then hopefully then everybody can work together.
Andy.
Well, for the last 10 years, I've been at the centre of efforts to unite the Cabinet, as was when we were in government, and then the shadow Cabinet in opposition. So it would be a piece of cake, to be honest, after that. But I pay tribute to Sean, because Sean has very much embraced the spirit of partnership, and that's how Greater Manchester succeeds. It's why it's carried us to this moment where we are ahead of the rest, because of strong partnership. We haven't let the petty divisions of local government divide us. People have risen above those things. That has been the Greater Manchester ethos, and that is what we must protect. We must build on the foundations laid by Sir Richard Lees, Sir Howard Bernstein, in taking this city region forward, and we must work hard to preserve that approach. It is my instinct. It's the way that I work. I've always been a team player in politics. You've never seen me going out criticising colleagues and undermining the... I don't work like that. I intrinsically believe that you achieve more together than you do alone. And that is what has carried Greater Manchester to this point. However, just a caveat, if I may, to place on that. It's not just about the leaders, though. The problem with devolution so far is it has been too closed in small rooms where opinion formers and those in leadership positions have taken decisions, but it hasn't involved people outside. The challenge for devolution is not just to unite the leaders, but to make it feel owned by the people of Greater Manchester, to make them feel involved in where we're going and the vision that we're building. That is the challenge of political leadership that is before us. We've got to make sure that this is a collective endeavour in which everybody feels they've got a part. And that is why, as I said at the beginning, you need experienced and strong political leadership to carry this city region forward. And I think I've got what it takes to do just that.
Okay, thank you. Please do start putting your hands up if you've got a question, and I will come to you in due course. We've had another one submitted from Dave Trimmingham. If you make yourself known, we'll get the microphone to you as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Dave Trimmingham, Managing Director of Turley in Manchester. Widespread support for the growth and investment that Northern Powerhouse promises contrasts with some communities' reaction to the implications of this as reflected in the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. If elected, how will candidates balance responding to public opinion that often seeks a status quo with shaping public opinion in support of growth and jobs?
So getting into the tension there between people seemingly wanting growth with Northern Powerhouse but the status quo with the GMSF. Andy?
Well, come and look at my constituency. If I was anti-growth or anti-building on green space, Lee wouldn't be what it is today. It's been heavily developed in the last 16 years, and I've supported that. But to pick up on what Sean was saying before, you do need a plan for Greater Manchester in the next 20 years, but it's got to be the right plan. It's got to carry people with it. There is going to be no point in the leaders pushing a spatial framework on the people of Greater Manchester that they completely reject. That would get devolution off to the worst possible start. And I think they were right to have concerns about it, because I saw in my own borough, developers called for the sites close to the East Lancs Road. They wanted to build on the green space that's easier to develop. And it may not be popular to say it in this room, but that is what people were calling for. But it wasn't linked to the public transport infrastructure. And I didn't think the homes that would be built on those places would solve the housing crisis. They would homes for people possibly who don't live in Greater Manchester. And I think we need a more ambitious plan for that than that for the people who live here. So yes, you are absolutely right. It is about marrying those tensions. But it is also about painting a picture of Greater Manchester in the next 20 years, where we have vibrant town centres. My worry was, if you just followed the spatial framework, you'd be left with decaying town centres surrounded by urban sprawl. And personally, I don't believe that is a vision for the future of Greater Manchester. We can set our sights higher than that. And my call to the developers and the planners in this room is go to our towns across the north of Greater Manchester, those towns that have struggled and felt left behind, the towns that largely voted leave at the referendum, and apply your minds to those places about how we can revitalise those places, put affordable and attractive homes for people in their 20s, people in their 30s, places to live, places that people want to live. That is what we should be doing, rather than just building on every scrap of green down every main road. And we're kidding ourselves in this room if we don't think that the public out there just did not accept that plan. So we've got to come back with something better, more imaginative. And that's what I will do if I'm elected as mayor.
Okay, Sean Anstey.
Well, the GMSF is not proposing to build on every scrap of green that is in Greater Manchester. More than half of this city region is either open space or green belt. And we know that if we want to be able to plan for growth, that we do so in a way that has a very long-term view about some of these choices that we need to make. And the problem with saying that we'll rewrite it, or we'll try again, or we'll do something else, or we'll scrap it, is that as soon as you come back with something else, the same issues are going to arise. The same conversations that we're having right now will happen again. And so the very heart of this is about leadership, about how are we going to say that there will be people who, no matter what you do, are going to be opposed to some of the things that are in that spatial framework. And I understand that. We live in a democracy. That's perfectly fine. But what we've got to do is say that we don't want to be like London, Cambridge, Bristol or Bath, where you have a rush hour that is all day, not just at the start or the end of the day, where you have houses, or that what once were houses that get turned into 7 or 8 flats. Because if you don't allow the city the space to grow, then our existing communities become squashed. And we need to do a much better job at getting out and speaking to people and saying, look, this is about our future. It's about your children's future, your grandchildren's future. It's about having the homes and jobs for people to see. And when we need political leadership, it's about standing up and being counted. And I tell you, there's only one person, again, on this stage who's done that consistently for the last few months since the publication of the spatial framework to say, yes, of course we want to have a conversation about the allocations. You can't have a consultation if they're set in stone. But let's not have a race to the bottom on what we do for future growth. We've got to win that argument in our communities across Greater Manchester, because the consequences of not doing so are so unpalatable that is absolutely the wrong thing for any mayoral candidate to want to do.
Thank you very much. Jane Brophy.
So it's a good question because it gets to the heart of what it's like to be part of a democracy, doesn't it? Because the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, it does take decisions out of the hands of local people. It does. Because the thing is, we need to get solutions that work for local communities. At the moment, there are benefits to having the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework because it does give you targets for house building. So, and we do need more houses, and you've also got the possibility that different areas can trade around how many houses they build. But the real problem with it at the moment is it isn't utilising the brownfield sites. And I think we've got a big challenge, whoever becomes mayor. If people aren't happy with the plan, they're not going to like it. And the whole position of being Greater Manchester Mayor is not going to work if local people aren't happy. And local people are not happy with the way this plan has been top-down imposed upon them, because actually they can see there are lots of brownfield sites. You only have to look around the area. We need to unlock those brownfield sites before we start going into the green belt. And I know from working in the health service, one of the challenges of not listening to local people is you don't actually get solutions to real problems. And this is it's a similar thing, because I think the question gets to the nub of this in the health service. The planners of the health service thought, okay, well, we have more GPs, we'll try and invest in community care. But it doesn't work because people still want to attend their local A&E. And people don't understand how the health service is working anymore, so they just go to A&E. Unless you actually get to grips with how people understand things and how they interact with their communities, you're not going to get solutions that work for everybody. And I think the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework is another example of that. If you have top-down solutions that don't consult and involve local people as much as they should be consulted and involved, then you don't actually get solutions that work. And I think that's going to be the key thing about the Greater Manchester Mayor, to show leadership, to make sure we do get it right for those communities.
Do you know we owe it to the 20,000 people that have responded to this first round of consultation to say that we're going to find a way through this plan, that we're going to elect somebody who's not just using the spatial framework for a political football between now and May the 4th. This is going to be something that is with us way beyond that period, about how we can make sure that we're sustainably planning for growth. And so you scrap it. You scrap it and start again. What are you going to do? You know, there are no solutions that are coming forward. It's too easy to have that race to the bottom, to play politics with this. This is too important for us in Greater Manchester over the next 20 years to say that we're just going to use it as a political football between now and May, that we're going to magic up land that somehow we're supposedly hiding from people in Greater Manchester that we can use in future. And what we need to do is say that we need the right development in the right place so that we can get the infrastructure that's planned with it. Because, again, the consequences of not doing so are there. And if the aim of all of this is to protect our green spaces and have a sustainable green belt, then leaving our planning system or land across communities in Greater Manchester open to planning by appeal is absolutely the wrong way to do it. Sure. This is about taking control of where we want development and getting the infrastructure with it in the first place.
I'm not saying scrap it. I'm not saying no spatial framework.
Fundamentally rewrite it. To what?
I'm saying have the right spatial framework. And what I'm saying to you is the plan that was produced by you and others
and 9 Labour leaders,
in my view, would have made our congestion much worse. It would not have solved our housing crisis, and it would have given us lower skill, lower wage jobs, and not the industry of the future that we need. And I believe there is something more ambitious that we can do. There are brownfield sites that haven't been built on, and the problem is, if you go straight to greenfield and you open that up, you totally take away the incentive to develop the brownfield sites that do exist. As I said, we should be thinking about revitalising our town centres first, linking in to public transport. I know for a fact that there wasn't close enough cooperation between those who put forward the plan and Transport for Greater Manchester. It wasn't integrated, and that is why the plan has got the reaction that it has. You've defended it here tonight. I don't think many people in Greater Manchester would be with you, because it wasn't a plan that looked as though it was sustainable for their communities. The right thing is to do is to listen to what people are saying, come back with a stronger plan that responds to their concerns, and that is exactly what I will do.
Okay, we'll take another question. There's one here on my far right.
Evening, my name is Joe Webb from Wake. Unlike the candidate side, not from Manchester, but I've lived here for 20 years. But I just want to ask you a question. As a taxpayer, I believe that some services, and I do realise it won't all be in your control if you get elected, but as a taxpayer, I believe some services need to be protected. And as a taxpayer who can probably afford that, I'm prepared to pay more tax for it. And I'm prepared to, especially if that tax is ring-fenced. Would you agree with me, in particular, when we're talking about health or social services? What would your view on that?
So the question is it right to pay more tax? Would people
Absolutely.
want to do that? Yeah.
Protect core services that this country or this region cannot afford at the moment.
I guess there's a precursor to that. Will you have the power to raise fiscal measures?
One of the key priorities for the Mayor, I think, in the first term that they have is to say that we need to continue to win this argument about having greater fiscal control for Greater Manchester, that we have the ability to be able not only just to look at health and social care and skills and employment, but how do we make sure that we have fiscal devolution across the city region, because that means that we're then able to influence on a greater level the funding and resources that go into all of our public services in Greater Manchester, and that's something that I think is pretty important. You take the health and social care system, we have a huge opportunity in Greater Manchester at the moment to do something that nowhere else in the country is able to do, which is to really look at how we have a sustainable health and social care system, one that's focusing on health and well-being, on employment, on trying to overcome a £2 billion deficit that exists in health and social care across Greater Manchester, and to do it in a way that generations and decades of government have failed to do. By us having a very clear view about how we're going to do that, I think means that we can set us up onto a more sustainable footing in future. And that's something that I think we absolutely have to have a focus on if we're going to say that we can be a bolder, stronger Greater Manchester.
Okay, the fiscal question, who's going to...
Okay. Yeah, I think the question's a really good question because it's asking, would people pay more for services? And you particularly mentioned health and social care. I think that people can see what's happening in our NHS at the moment, and they're appalled, quite ashamed if you look what's going on in our A&E departments. It's quite clear that the government gave this money for the Better Care Fund, which was supposed to deliver better social care for people through local authorities. It hasn't happened. It needs to be a lot more. Also, we've got an elderly population, it's rising, the numbers are rising, we've got better treatments. Most people want our health and social care system to be world class. Quite clearly, it isn't, and it should be. Now, my party is thinking about this very carefully because we've set something up called the New Beveridge Report. It's been led by Norman Lamb, whose name is somebody you'll know because he was a former care minister, and he was the one that started looking at mental health and to campaign really to get mental and physical health on equal parity. Now, part of this is looking at how we fund health, because if we look at other equal countries to us, we're not funding per person the same level of health as other places do. I think most people would pay more for health and social care, particularly if they know where the money's going to. Most people want to pay more for the right care for their loved ones, whether it's their disabled relative or their elderly parents. Most people want that proper care in place, and we should pay for that. And we're not going to get a decent healthcare system, and we're not going to get a decent social care system unless we put more money in. Now, unless we actually raise tax to do that, I think it's going to be problematic. We've already seen some initiatives around government putting the social care tax into council tax. But I think we need to do a lot more. We need to have that coming in from national government as well, to make sure we get the social care there. I think we need to be asking our public the question. We shouldn't take voters for granted. If people want social care and they want better health care and they want a system we can all be proud of, I think most people recognise that it does need investment, it does need funding. So I would like to start a public debate, and it's not a one-party thing, this. It's about my party wants to have, all party wants to have the Labour Party and the Tory Party having a real debate, an all-party commission to make sure we look at health and social care and look at how we're going to fund it in the future.
Okay, thank you. Andy Burnham.
Well, yes is the answer to your question. When I was Health Secretary in 2009, I was told directly by the civil service that social care in England was broken. And if it was allowed to collapse, it would drag down the National Health Service with it. So I initiated a green paper and a white paper where I proposed to grasp the nettle and say, to fund social care, we should ask everybody to contribute 10% of what they leave behind, to pay for social care differently in effect. Move away from charges for social care that we have at the moment and means testing. Because I said it's better to get a contribution of everybody to protect the 90% of what they've worked for than to leave people exposed to care costs in later life, but sometimes paying hundreds of thousands of pounds or nothing at all. That random system of social care effectively broken. The Conservatives at the time called it a death tax, and that was then the plans were off. And to be honest with you, that contributed to my disillusionment about Westminster politics, because it has got an inability to grasp big issues and put forward big solutions that will deal with the problem. Go forward a couple of months, the Conservative and Liberal coalition came in, and they must have got the same advice from the civil service that I had, that social care in England was going to collapse if something wasn't done. And I warned them that you cannot cut social care and local government repeatedly and not expect there to be an issue on the NHS. And what's happened over the last 7 years, A&E has got worse and worse and worse as more and more older people have become trapped in hospital and can't get home. And that is what is happening in the National Health Service right now. It's a failure of political leadership, it's cowardice, it's been an inability to grasp the issue. And last year, the government was still cutting Salford Council, Manchester City Council, Tameside Council for social care. You know, I didn't hear Sean speaking up to say that was wrong. He should have done, because they can't keep cutting our councils and expect there not to be serious consequences in the National Health Service. A&E waiting times at their worst ever level now. And in Greater Manchester, we are not immune. There are good things happening here, but by no means are we immune. You need somebody to lead your health service in Greater Manchester who knows what they are doing. I have been consistently ahead of this debate over the last 7 years. We're seeing integration in Greater Manchester at my instigation between health trusts and community services. We have to go much further. And actually, last point, we have to change the way the money flows in the NHS. At the moment, hospitals get paid by everybody who comes through the door. You have to completely rethink the incentives and the way the money works. And you have to have an incentive system to keep older, vulnerable people better supported in their own homes, getting rid of the culture of 15-minute visits. It requires a big change and somebody who knows what they're doing. And again, that's what I can provide.
Well, and I think what you say to that, Andy, is you were the person who campaigned against health and social care devolution to Greater Manchester. When we signed the Memorandum of Understanding in 2015, I think you described it as a Swiss cheese effect, and you wanted to keep control of it. Well, I think it's great that you've had a sudden conversion to localism and to come with us in a way that is going to make a huge difference to what we can do in health and social care in Greater Manchester, because this ultimately is about saying how can we have, and in Trafford, so the council that I lead, we continue to invest in health and social care to make sure that we're funding our demographic pressures, and that means I have to take difficult decisions elsewhere. And this role is about taking difficult decisions and having the resilience and the ability to be able to do that. And that's what I would want to do as we go through. I hope that's not Jeremy Hunt. As we go through health and social care devolution in Greater Manchester.
Just a point of fact, though, Sean. If you look back at what I said was, I didn't oppose it per se. What I said was, don't devolve a funding crisis to Greater Manchester, make us pick up the pieces. And you just said before about the £2 billion deficit in our health system. You know, that's what I was arguing about. And we are receiving an NHS that is deeply in the red. And that, in my view, is not right. You should devolve an NHS that is stable and is in the black, and that is not what your government is doing.
And what we need to do is take the NHS and our social care out of political argument like this, because what we need is all parties to come together, our health leaders to come together, and we need a solution. Going back to the questioner, actually maybe we do need to consider paying more in to get the health and social care out that our people deserve.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. We're into the last few minutes. Maybe time for another couple of questions. There's one here at the front, and then I'll go to the chap there.
Jeremy Hines, Head of Planning at Savills. At the end of your term of office, what would you want to point to in order to define your term as having been successful?
Andy.
Well, the first term is 3 years, so there's a limit to what you can do. But on the back of what I was saying earlier about homelessness, I would wanted to have eradicated rough sleeping in Greater Manchester, and I think that's possible. I don't think it should be considered inevitable that some people have to spend the night on cold streets in 2017. We can do something to change that, and we should do, in my view. The second thing is I would have wanted to have changed the opportunities and prospects of young people, and I am going to make them my priority. I want to deliver a concessionary or free bus pass for 16 to 18-year-olds so that we send a very clear message to all young people in Greater Manchester that we want them to get on in life. Thirdly, I would want to have a spatial framework that sets out plans to solve the housing crisis. I would have wanted to have begun work on a dedicated cycle network across Greater Manchester. I would have wanted to have developed plans for the re-regulation of our buses, and crucially, that plan for the integration, the true integration of health and social care, and put our health service back on a path towards sustainability. Going forward in the long term, my vision for Greater Manchester is as a place where people get on, where we have a place where people are not left behind, a beacon of social justice to the rest. But people begin to look here and say there is a better way of doing things than leaving things completely to the market. There is a better way of running our bus system. These are the things that I want Greater Manchester to be. You know, Greater Manchester has changed the world in the past. We were the home of the trade union movement in the 19th century, the suffragette movement in the 20th century. I think we now have got to show that we can give power back to those communities that Westminster have left behind and build here a better vision of how we run a decent society in 2017.
Jane.
My legacy as Greater Manchester Mayor is going to be around our health outcomes, because that affects everything. That affects our young people's future, it affects things like the environment and looking at tackling climate change and tackling air pollution. Because at the moment, if you look at the health outcomes in Greater Manchester, there are massive differentials between different areas. We need to close the gap between the poorest health and the best health in Greater Manchester. But we also need to raise standards for everybody so that everybody has better health outcomes. And you can only do that with a truly integrated service. And looking at how everything links together, like the police, the environment, like transport, the health and social care system. So my legacy would be that over time we would have better health outcomes for everybody.
Okay, Sean.
Well, I think it's too early after 3 years to start talking about a legacy. 3 years is not long enough to have a legacy. What it's about is saying that we're starting our journey to a more prosperous, global, open Greater Manchester, where we're tackling some of these things that we know for generations have plagued this city region. So whether it's worklessness, whether it's the fact that people lost their jobs in the industrial decline, whether it's those health and social care inequalities that people face in Greater Manchester, I'd want us to be saying that we're much more confident about our future, that we know that the next mayoral term is going to continue between 2020 and 2024 to get us onto a path of much greater prosperity, of a journey that we think is going to be beneficial for everybody in Greater Manchester. Because if we're doing that, then we're making this position worth it for people. If we don't make it worth it, if we're not able to get people to relate to the mayoralty, then something has gone drastically wrong in the 3 years in the first term.
Okay, final question of the night to the chap that's been waiting patiently there.
Yeah, Andy Walker, editor of Infrastructure Intelligence. Interesting to hear what the three candidates said about the spatial framework, because one of the things that we're doing at the moment is looking quite a lot at how we develop and how we bring infrastructure into cities across the country. But you can't do that without public support. And all the surveying we're doing at the moment is saying that 80% of the industry is worried about how do we get the public to support development, to support infrastructure. So what will you guys do to ensure that the public is consulted with properly and brought on side so that we can actually develop what we need to develop going forward in this great city region of ours?
Well, you know, we've been asking the wrong question around the spatial framework. We know that the National Housing Federation recently, in the survey that they completed, that there's a majority of people in support of new homes, even in their existing community, for the first time in a long time. So for every day that we allow this debate to be about Greenbelt, and solely Greenbelt, rather than the purpose of the spatial framework in the first place, we're always going to lose that argument. And we have to change that. We have to say that I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks with some of our Greenbelt groups in Trafford and indeed across Greater Manchester. And at the end of it, once we've sort of laid out what it is that we're seeking to do, we're not always going to agree, but we try and get an understanding first of what it is that we're seeking to do. And there's a responsibility on politicians to say that we are going to stand up and be counted. We're not going to play the games with Greenbelt. It's very easy for me to take a politically popular stance and say, well, let's just not do it. That's not right. And at the end of the conversation, most people have said to me, do you know what, Sean, let's have a conversation about this. Why don't we do this or why don't we do that? And we're starting to talk about the solutions rather than just putting ourselves into a position where you're never going to win the argument that's been put forward. And so I think that there is something about that honesty, that leadership, that integrity, that authenticity to say that we can find a way through this. And if you do it in a collaborative way, then generally what we'll get is a result that is much more favourable than I think what we're seeing across some parts of Greater Manchester at the moment.
Jane, both of you.
I think this question is key because this is a new role, the Greater Manchester Mayor. You don't want to start off with somebody in this new role that's imposing a top-down decision that hasn't got the approval of large numbers of our local communities. It's absolutely clear that we've got to get this right. If we don't involve people, if we don't consult people, they're not going to have confidence in the role. It's fine for people to make these decisions top down, but actually at the end of the day, this is a much bigger role than just the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. It's important that's right. It's important that we go back to people and consult with people about that. But actually the role of Mayor needs to show leadership. It also needs to show listening to people. And I would go back to those communities and work with them, make sure we have a big Greater Manchester plan that is something that everybody can agree about, and it's not just a top-down approach. It's a genuine grassroots local approach as well.
Okay, Andy Burnham.
Well, the spatial framework began with a call for sites from developers, and I would argue that that is unlikely to deliver something that's going to command public support, because it's not starting with the public interest. I would say it should have started, as you're suggesting, I think, with an infrastructure plan. Where is the infrastructure going to go to sustain ourselves as a city region? Where do we need to improve public transport? Do we need those radial links that Jane was saying, linking the outlying towns? Not just transport infrastructure. What about digital infrastructure? Shouldn't we be getting more serious about that as a city region, so that we don't make people commute every single day into the city centre? We should have had an ambitious infrastructure plan first, because the public are cynical when they hear, oh, this site will be released, but there'll be 106 for this road that might... And they don't buy it, to be honest. And they're right not to buy it, because I've got examples in my constituency of promises that were made that were never delivered, estates of houses that were never fully finished off and handed over to the local authority. That is why there's a cynicism out there about these things. And what we need is a much more credible and convincing plan for the future of Greater Manchester. I want to enthusiastically sell this plan and say this is a good vision for our city region. It is about homes, it is about jobs, but it's also about livability. It's also about town centres. It's also about cycle routes, green spaces, places that people can enjoy life as well. And that plan was not the spatial framework. And Jane's right. If devolution starts with a kind of forest fire of opposition from the public, then I'm afraid it won't last very long. If we're not going to be prepared to listen to the public and respond to what they're saying, then quite frankly, devolution will just become another form of detested politics that doesn't listen to the concerns that they have. Actually, let's get out of this room, listen to what those communities are saying. My community in Leigh is not against development. We've had plenty of it in the last 20 years, but they deserve the right kind of development, future-looking development, sustainable development, and that is what we need. That is what you will get if I am the Mayor of Greater Manchester.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the Place North West Greater Manchester mayoral debate. Please do join me in thanking our three candidates for their time.